Crerar. I'm the CEO of Edelman Africa. This is our 25th year of studying trust in institutions, and that's 25 years of using insights from around the world to understand institutional shifts, societal changes, and the impact that that has on trust capital. The trust capital that we believe is the most important currency that any institution can have with its stakeholders. Our work in trust has also afforded us the opportunity to strengthen and enrich our reputation management work and the communications programming that we do for our clients, many of whom are here with us tonight. And thank you for entrusting us as a partner. That will be the last trust pun for the evening. And thank you to old friends and new friends for coming through. We really do look forward to sharing these insights with you. And I think particularly auspicious given that it's also 25 years for GIBS, the 25th anniversary. So really pleased to be able to share our 25 years together with you. Thank you for allowing us to use your amazing facilities and partnering with us on this amazing piece of work. Tonight we are joined by an outstanding panel of experts who will unpack and discuss the findings from the report shortly from each of their perspectives, and I look forward to welcoming them on stage shortly. Now, turning to the findings from this report, as we hit the quarter-century mark, the data in this year's report reveals a troubling and remarkably global trend. In the nearly 50 elections in the past year, incumbent parties have been ousted in many Western democracies, including the US, the UK, France, Germany, and Canada. There were only 2 countries that went to the polls that saw the opposite effect, and South Africa was one of them. Business has been pushed back on its involvement in societal issues from DEI to sustainability, and these events are reflected in this year's findings, which document a crisis of grievance that creates new trust challenges for business and other institutional leaders. Trust in news events are always in dialogue. Over the last 25 years, the Edelman Trust Barometer findings have reflected public sentiment and offered a path forward following major global events. The story of the Edelman Trust Barometer began in 1999 with what was called then the Battle of Seattle, when anti-globalization protests organized by non-governmental organizations erupted in violence at the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference. We wondered as Edelman at that point how NGOs would be perceived relative to the institutions of business, government, and the media. And that's how the Trust Barometer was first born. The Trust Barometer posed a simple question: how much do you trust each institution to do what is right? 2 years later, the first Trust Barometer report found that NGOs were, in fact, the most trusted institution in most countries. The war in Iraq, the financial crisis, Brexit, COVID, and the invasion of Ukraine, each of these influence and reflect back trust in institutions. Following the Iraq War, the US government never regained its position as the most trusted institution. Financial services companies are only recently starting to recover some of their trust losses following the global financial crisis. Trust inequality spiked leading up to Brexit and has only become more widespread since. The COVID pandemic further eroded trust in authorities and led to the rise of business trust over NGOs. The Ukraine war and other more recent geopolitical conflicts have led to a surge in brand boycotts. World events have challenged and upended the trust equation time and time again. The long story over 25 years of research, and I'm not going to read you every year of the 25, is one of ongoing institutional failures to meet the moment. In 2005, the Trust Barometer documented a shift from traditional authorities to peer influence. In 2016, we dug into the mass class divide, or trust inequality, between the highest and lowest earners. The destabilization of trust and the emergence of business as the most trusted institution all set up our current moment, the crisis of grievance, which is the focus of this year's research. For the academics in the room, this year we were fielded in we were in field in 28 countries on 6 continents from late October to mid-November last year. The data collected is representative of the general population, and throughout the report you'll see markers to clearly indicate which countries are represented in our global averages, which sometimes vary when we look at longer trends or questions that we were not able to ask in all countries surveyed. What the data reveals is that in the last year, these mounting institutional failures have pushed people to the brink, leaving them feeling vulnerable, unprotected, and looking for new ways to drive change. I mentioned it earlier, but the many elections we saw over the last year have not all helped to improve trust. Our trust index, as you see it here, measures the average percent trust in business, government, media, and NGOs in each country. Year over year, there hasn't been much change. The most trusting markets continue to be China, Indonesia, India, and the UAE. This year's least trusting countries are the UK, Germany, South Korea, and Japan. Some of those quite interesting. Of the 13 countries we measure that had elections or government changes in the past year, only 2 of them saw significant changes as a result. And for once, we're very glad to be on that scorecard. Argentina and South Africa. This year, South Africa's overall trust score moves into neutral levels after remaining in distrust for the past few years. As we look at the individual trust scores for each institution, we can see that business is the most trusted, followed by NGOs, but most pleasing is the 7-point increase in trust levels for government. And you can see that that's got a light green circle around it, which shows statistical significance around that mark. This is the highest improvement we've seen since we've been studying trust in 2016. And really important as probably one of the major drivers of how our overall trust score shifted into that neutral position. What has changed, on the other hand, in some of these scores are the fears and job-related insecurities that are coming from our respondents. In the last year, the data shows significant increases of job loss fears related to globalization. That includes trade conflicts, foreign competition, and offshoring affecting people's livelihoods. Economic pressure in the form of recession and technology automating away people's roles or making their skills obsolete are growing concerns. And I think related to these rising job insecurities, we're seeing a first time ever decline in trust for employers. While trust in employers is still far higher than trust in other institutions, there's been a significant decline in our global average employer trust. And it's dropped by a significant 6 or more points in the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and Germany. While the other declines you see on the chart are not significant, they are widespread, reflecting a broad concern over the trustworthiness of employers. Adding to the sense of insecurity, lower earners continue to live in a very different trust reality than those with higher income levels. You'll notice that in 2014, both the highest and lowest earning quartiles were distrusting of institutions on average. But in the intervening years, trust among the high income recovered into neutral trust in 2021 and has remained there, climbing slightly, and indicated that the system is working for them. Those in the lower quartile of income, however, have remained mired in distrust, trusting only business and NGOs. Despite this, though, the biggest trust inequality is for trust in business, where there's a 17-point trust gap between high and low income respondents, which is interesting to note. We also note an increasing and ongoing sense of betrayal. Since 2021 to now, we have double-digit increases to the fear of being lied to and misled by business leaders and journalists. The margin of growth is lower for government, but still a high sense of betrayal among respondents. Similarly, the wealthy are seen as part of the problem, not a solution to it. Just over half say that the wealthy don't pay a fair share of taxes, and nearly 2/3 say that their selfishness causes many of their problems. This is really an interesting statistic, and one of the most pivotal from this year's report. With all of this dysfunction and all these obstacles to making the world a better place, many view unsanctioned means now as being on the table as opportunity to drive change. 4 in 10 people approve of at least one form of hostile activism as a means to drive change, meaning that they approve of attacking people online, intentionally spreading disinformation, threatening or committing violence, or damaging public or private property to make their voices heard. And looking at global age groups, over 1 in 2 young adults approve of this hostile activism. This statistic for South Africa almost exactly mirrors the global average in this regard. So all of these institutional failures that I've presented to you, the sense of unfairness, the fear of being lied to, the lack of confidence that sanctioned means are actually going to drive change and be effective, have come to a boiling point this year. And this is what's creating our crisis of grievance. That's creating a zero-sum mindset and putting further pressure on trust. What we can see is that grievance flourishes when there's a sense that we are competing for smaller crumbs of a shrinking pie. Just over 1 in 3 globally feel a sense of confidence that the next generation will be better off than they are today. In most developed countries, represented in black in the chart, less than 1 in 5 say the next generation will be better off. Just 14% in Japan and Germany and only 9% in France. In Africa, Kenya and Nigeria are slightly more optimistic than South Africa in this regard. The fear of oppression, experiencing prejudice, discrimination, or racism is rising sharply around the world. We are at all-time highs in the fear of being discriminated against, with a startling 10-point increase to what's been a relatively stable figure since 2021. South Africa is now at 77%, level with Kenya. We're seeing double-digit increases hit across 15 of 28 countries, up a massive 23 points in Indonesia, 13 in Colombia, 15 in Spain, among other major increases. We recorded all-time highs in the majority of countries we measured, indicated on the chart with green triangles. Around the world, this is saying to us that people are more afraid that they are going to face bias and unfairness. And this fear of being discriminated against is being felt across a range of demographics, beyond those that have historically experienced oppression. The fear of discrimination increased sharply for men as well as women. It rose significantly across age groups, and most remarkably, our highest income respondents show an 8-point increase and are just as likely to fear discrimination as those with lower income. This context has created what we're calling an emotionally charged moment, where people feel like they're being taken advantage of, that the system is unfair, and that they are personally being harmed because of it. Today, 7 in 10 in South Africa hold grievances against business, government, and the rich. This is 10 points higher than the global average. To understand this dynamic better, we've identified those who have a grievance mindset. So these are people who believe that business and government serve the interest of only a few and not the many, that government and business actions hurt them rather than help them, and that the system is biased in favor of the rich. While regular people struggle to pay their bills, the rich get richer. As they agree with more of these sentiments, their sense of grievance starts to heighten. 46% hold a moderate sense of grievance, and another 25% hold a high sense of grievance. And as you'll see on the following slides, this sense of grievance imposes a serious penalty on trust, institutions, and our ability to be able to work together. Across the globe, in nearly every country we measured, the majority of people hold a moderate or greater sense of grievance against business, government, and the rich. This is true for all African countries surveyed, with Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya in the top 5, only with Spain and the UK. On the far side of the chart, it's noteworthy that countries such as Singapore and India, where there are higher levels of trust and optimism, have a far lower sense of grievance than those where optimism and trust are low. This sense of grievance imposes a massive cost to society. If you have a high sense of grievance, it's more likely that a zero-sum mindset takes over. Your gain is my loss is effectively what people are experiencing, and what helps someone with politics different than mine comes at a cost to me. Among those who hold a high sense of grievance, more than half believe that what helps people who don't share their politics comes at a cost to them, putting the social contract at risk and creating a very high probability that collaboration on a large scale becomes almost impossible. And unfortunately, grievance also imposes a severe penalty on trust. So with low grievance, all institutions are trusted, as you can see on this chart. On the left, with a moderate level of grievance, government and media fall into distrust, and business and NGOs are trusted. Among those with a high sense of grievance, however, 3 of the 4 institutions are distrusted, with a 25-point drop for trust in business when comparing the moderate and high grievance segments. So basically, this tells us that the higher the level of grievance, the less trusting you are of the institutions. Grievance also makes people more suspicious of innovation, and it'll impede the implementation of new technologies, such as AI. Those with a high sense of grievance are 22 points less trusting of AI than those with a low sense of grievance. AI faces many challenges to acceptance, and we saw this as part of our research last year as well. Even among those with a low sense of grievance, only 65% are comfortable with the business use of AI. That acceptance level craters to just 36% among those with a high sense of grievance. If people hold a sense of resentment, they are far less open and enthusiastic about innovation and change. And if they hold back on innovation and change, it doesn't bode well for the future of society. Grievance also carries a severe trust penalty for business leaders. CEOs are distrusted amongst those with a high sense of grievance, with a 34-point difference in CEO trust when compared to those with a low sense of grievance. And my CEO, the leader of my employer, falls by 21 percentage points when comparing those with a high sense of grievance to those with a low sense of grievance, posing a serious challenge to those who need to lead a company while trusted by only half of their employees. So, high levels of grievance are bringing both greater expectations as well as lower trust for business. So how do companies and CEOs best navigate this crisis of grievance? In South Africa, business and NGOs have a far higher trust remit than the other institutions. They are seen as both competent and ethical, the two dimensions of trust that we measure. And this chart shows this in two broad component pieces. Trust is informed by whether we believe an institution has competence, it's able to get things done, or ethics, that it's doing what is right. This chart shows the competence and ethics ratings for all four main institutions in South Africa, with 2025 data in the dark grey and 2020 data in the light grey. Business and NGOs are in the top right quadrant with positive scores for both competence and ethics. You'll notice that business has had a 42-point gain in ethics since 2020, putting it just behind NGOs on the ethics axis, reflecting business's positive performance during the COVID pandemic. Business is also seen as the most competent institution, with a competence score significantly higher than that of government. This explains why there's great pressure on business to step in and take a leadership role on societal issues. But grievance comes with a severe reassessment of business. Those with a low sense of grievance, shown by the light grey circle in the upper right, see business in a positive light, with very high scores for both competence and ethics. With a moderate sense of grievance, the scores for business are slightly lower, but still positive. But it's an entirely different reality among those with a high sense of grievance, where business is seen as 81 points less ethical and 37 points less competent. It's noteworthy that the penalty is far higher for the ethics dimension than for competence, although both fall. So where there is high grievance, business has a much smaller runway for trust and for leadership. NGOs, media and government, you can see here, are similarly penalized, with all four institutions in the lower left quadrant indicating negative or zero scores on both the ethics and competence dimensions. So, what is business to do? And how can companies best navigate a high grievance world? Well, it really begins with economics. So regardless of the level of grievance a respondent might hold, there is similarly high expectation that business must bring well-paying jobs into local communities and provide the training and reskilling to keep us competitive in the future. Jobs and job security both improve people's own outlook for their future and help give them confidence that the future of their communities will be more secure. But the expectations go beyond business' traditional role as job creator. Perhaps surprisingly, grievance actually increases the demand for business action. So among those with high levels of grievance, people are far more likely to believe that business is not doing enough to address issues such as affordability, climate, retraining, misinformation, or discrimination. This creates enormous challenges for business to navigate. High grievance brings higher expectations as well as lower trust, making it much harder for companies to know where, when, and how to engage. The good news is that CEOs do have permission to act, you'll be relieved to know, but when leaders take action, they need to ensure that they have the standing for doing so. First, across all levels of grievance, you will have a clear license to engage if your business has the ability to make a major difference, and where engagement will help your own bottom line. If your business has relevant expertise or resources, you do have standing to engage, is what our respondents are telling us. If the engagement will also improve your business performance, you also have standing to engage. Similarly, CEOs have the permission to act when they can fix problems that they were involved in the first place, or if it could harm any of their stakeholders. Again, the data shows that this is true regardless of the level of grievance that respondents hold. In fact, taking responsibility for impacts and protecting your stakeholders can prevent grievance from taking root altogether. And finally, there's a very important role for employers, especially since the risks that grievance might contaminate workplace culture are significant. Employees see the workplace as an island of civility, and they expect businesses to keep grievances from undermining collaboration at work. It's important to really set and enforce norms around appropriate behaviours, ensure that even contentious issues can be discussed without personal animosity in the workplace. Addressing and easing the crisis of grievance cannot be the job of business alone. Every institution must work together to address the root causes of grievance, to help rebuild trust and give people a renewed sense of optimism for their future. We know that governments around the globe are seen as ineffective, not making an impact on everyday lives. But if government leaders can deliver results that directly benefit me, then I'll be more likely to listen to them as legitimate authorities. And this is according to our respondents. It's really important for government to design and enforce policies that reflect the needs of everyday people and demonstrate that those policies will have a positive impact on people's lives. NGOs have a unique role to play, and probably an even more unique one into the future. Earlier we discussed how they're the most trusted institution among the high grievance group. They're also the most likely to be seen as a unifier, even among those who see a lot of injustice in the system. Among those with a high level of grievance, only NGOs have the standing to be a unifying force to help bring people together around a shared cause or mission. This data also suggests that if you are one of the less well-regarded institutions, it might help to partner with NGOs to reach more disaffected populations. Media need to put the facts first. Greater grievance brings greater suspicions that media are chasing audience engagement or ideology rather than just informing public discourse. Journalistic enterprises need to make their intentions clear and show that they prioritize trustworthy information over profits or politics. For leaders across institutions, influence is earned through compassion and not power. Show people that you listen and understand them. That's what registers among those with a high sense of grievance who are far more skeptical of your degree, your title, or your formal position of power. Ultimately, trust is going to be critical to overcoming grievance and allowing optimism to flourish. Here, trust in institutions is plotted as the x-axis, from 1 being total distrust up to 9 being full trust. Starting on the left-hand side, you can see that distrust creates an environment where grievance flourishes, represented by the green bar. And economic optimism, the feeling that you'll be better off in 5 years, is really, really limited. But as you move rightward and people grow less distrusting, grievance and optimism begin to equalize. And when people can trust the institutions in their lives, optimism ultimately overpowers grievance. And this brings us to the conclusions and implications of our report. What is it going to take for us to build trust and optimism despite this crisis of grievance? Well, firstly, we need to begin with addressing the grievances themselves. A generation of institutional failures, as you saw earlier, have given rise to all of these grievances. So leading through this moment will really require us to understand the economic realities of our stakeholders, champion their shared interests, and create opportunities to build optimism for the future. Secondly, business action is not just welcome, it's expected. People are hurting and they need institutions to work for them. CEOs must understand where they have permission to act, represent their stakeholders' interests, and advocate for their organization. Which brings us to the 3. Business can't act alone. Institutions need to mutually invest in local communities, clean up their information ecosystem, and democratize job skills. And in this moment, we must avoid even the slightest impression of unfairness. And finally, all institutions must work to restore trust, which will allow grievances to dissipate and optimism to drown out a zero-sum mindset and give us the renewed confidence that collaboration will ultimately benefit all.